Monday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock, time for Sports4CLE. Hope you had a great weekend. Plenty of Browns to talk about a little later in the show. Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan will join us. And we begin by talking Browns with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter. So reports from multiple sources are starting to circulate that the door is now closed on Jarvis Landry returning to the Browns. Mary Kay Cabot over the weekend, frequent guest on the show, tweeted out after taking David Bell in the third round, Browns unlikely to sign Jarvis Landry. Bell can play outside. He'll probably initially work into the slot. Landry visited the Saints. His names have now, Landry's name has now also been tied to the Titans as well as the Ravens. With that, let's welcome in Browns beat reporter Scott Petrak. And Scott, you and I talked about this. It's really not a surprise. But when you start hearing names associated with Jarvis Landry, it's looking more and more like the Browns are moving on from him.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, the first move was when they cut him, right? Instead of paying him the $15 million that he was due, they saved the cash and salary cap space. And then to draft David Bell, I was told before the draft that if the Browns took a receiver relatively high, it probably eliminated Jarvis from returning. David Bell was pick number 99, so I don't know if that, precludes the Browns from adding another receiver, period. But he's the same kind of receiver Jarvis Landry is, right? Not the fastest guy in the world. Good hands, physical. The Browns believe he can separate and still get open. But that's a lot of what Jarvis Landry is. So it just doesn't feel like there's a fit on either side right now.
And we'll get more into that Jarvis Landry, David Bell thing in a minute. But I know you wrote an article about this. There appears to be gaps at wide receiver, gaps on the D-line. Do you think the Browns did enough in the draft?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I keep wrestling with, because it feels to me like all the stuff we talked about before the draft, right? Do they have a number 2 receiver? Do they have a number 2 defensive end? Do they have enough at the defensive tackle position? Yes, the Browns drafted guys at all those spots. And in some positions, they drafted 2, right? 2 receivers, 2 defensive ends. But you still come away going, man, do we know for sure who the number 2 receiver is? Do we know for sure who the number 2 end is? Do they have a stud D tackle? And I would say the answer to all those questions is no, but that doesn't mean the Browns feel the same way. And I feel like Andrew Berry threw a ton of resources at all those spots, but it was more of a quantity, right? He threw a bunch of numbers, drafted a bunch of guys, signed guys leading up into the draft at all those spots where I think unless the situation is perfect, which could be a Jadeveon Clowney, right? He comes back at defensive end. But unless the situation's perfect, I think the Browns could say, hey, we're content. We have enough bodies, and we think we can make it work with the guys that they have right now.
Yeah, and that's interesting. That doesn't even factor into potential injuries at those 2 areas, which would really throw it into kind of a whacked-out mess. All right, we're going to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, this one, about David Bell and the wide receiver situation.
A few quick things. David Bell, we don't need Jarvis back. This kid will replace him and do better than him. Number 2 is, what did San Francisco trade for Trey Lance? 3 first-round picks, about the same we give up for Deshaun Watson, which is a proven commodity. This kid ain't even ready to play yet. And then why is everyone dogging the Browns over the Deshaun Watson trade? And number 3 is, can we sign a couple, 1-year deals with Akeem Hicks or Sheldon Richardson? And number 4, you and Quincy, I got love for that brother too, should get a roundtable discussion going when the Brown season starts at a local pub. I bet you guys would pack it. All right, Dave. I'll talk to you. Bye.
All right, appreciate the voicemails. And along the lines of David Bell, Doug Kazarian from ESPN, 2022 NFL draft questions. This is his favorite pick. You look at it, and his measurables weren't great. Football field, he shines. Once he starts producing just like he did in college, everyone will wonder how this guy fell into the 3rd round and why 15 wideouts were drafted ahead of him. And, Scott, there's a lot to unpack. That was a great call. I like it a lot. But specifically to Bell, this is the time of year where people get crazy with the measurables, and sometimes we forget you got to go out on a football field and do good things, and David Bell's done that.
Yeah, that's why this time of year is so difficult, Dave, because yes, production matters, right? And you see that. And if you don't have production in college, it's awful hard to say, yeah, you're going to have production in the NFL. But measurables matter too, right? I mean, speed matters, height matters, all those things matter, which is why a guy like Colt McCoy doesn't have the same career he did in the NFL. Or Ken Dorsey, I remember him coming out of Miami and, oh my gosh, he was 52-1 or whatever the record was. Well, he couldn't play at the NFL level, couldn't start at the NFL level. So you do need certain traits physically to succeed in the NFL. And we can argue whether speed at receiver is one of those traits. I mean, that's a pretty important trait, but it's not the end-all be-all. And I think Jarvis Landry is a great example. And he ran like a 4.7 coming out of LSU, drops to the second round, and then is the most productive receiver in NFL history to start a career. Like the most catches for like the first 2, 3, 4 years in the league. So it's not everything, but teams do look at it. And that's why he was available at number 99, because the guy was an All-American. He was a receiver of the year in a stacked Big Ten, but he's still around at 99 because he doesn't run well. So he's going to have to prove that he can get open at this level. And if he can, then he's going to have success because we know he can catch the ball and he's got good size to play that position.
Yeah, and it's important to note, everybody in the NFL is bigger, faster, and stronger than he played against in the college. You know, you're playing against the best of the best, so I get it. But we're not running an obstacle course. We're playing football. So that's the other thing. Those are the balancing acts. I love the idea of a veteran defensive tackle like Akeem Hicks as well, because there are some intriguing young guys that Andrew Berry is bringing in.
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel like they're one guy short at D tackle. And if it could be a big name guy like Hicks, I mean, Hicks is the obvious guy that's out there. You know, Larry Ogunjobi, depending on how his Achilles is after, I think it blew out in the playoffs last year, he would intrigue me because I know what kind of a guy he is and what kind of a worker he is. But if you just add one more, then you're not forcing Perry and Winfrey to have a huge impact immediately as a rookie, right? Taven Bryan from Jacksonville was not good in Jacksonville. He was a first-round pick, but they gave up on him after 4 years. Jordan Elliott was a third-round pick of the Browns 2 years ago and really hasn't made an impact. So instead of kind of relying on all these unproven guys to come in and be stalwarts for you, it makes sense to me to try to go find that one veteran that can like knock everybody down a notch and be kind of the main guy at that position. Yeah,
give the young guys time to develop. And I think that's the other thing about guys on one-year contracts that makes a lot of sense. And Andrew Berry has had success doing that, so let's see if he can fill those in. A guy you mentioned is really intriguing. ESPN has key intel on all 32 teams and draft guys. For the Browns, it's Perrion Winfrey. He's intense and he's got an edge to him. That's from an AFC exec. It might be an acquired taste, but he brings intensity and he can play. The other thing about him that has come out, and I don't think we've had a chance to talk about it, he was felt like he was miscast in the defensive line and what Oklahoma wanted him to do, which you put somebody that's kind of intense in the right situation, it usually raises the level up some too.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's reason to think there's a lot of upside with Winfrey. I mean, you know, the energy is off the charts, and it's not just the Zoom call he did with us minutes after being picked. His coaches say that about him at Oklahoma. The Browns scouts said they noticed it right away at Oklahoma and at the Senior Bowl. So that's real. And then I also think, you know, that if he spent a lot of time at nose tackle, the Browns aren't going to ask him to do this. He's going to be a 3 technique that tries to push up the field and get penetration in the run game and in the pass game. So I think that should free him up to kind of reach that potential. But so I like that pick a lot. I think it's something to be excited about. The only question is, are you expecting him to be a, 40, 50 snap guy week one, or, can you bring in a guy and make it less pressurized, I guess, transition to the NFL? Yeah.
Let him kind of grow at his pace. And then when he's ready, if he shows he's ready, turn him loose. I agree wholeheartedly with you. Obviously, the big thing that everybody's going to wonder is, and we're not going to have any definite to it yet, is Deshaun Watson. And there is news coming out. Ed Gallick tweets this out. ongoing civil cases. Judge has ordered the lawyer for accusers, that's all 22 of them, same lawyer, to turn over medical, and documents from experts by Friday from the accusers of the alleged sexual misconduct. And the other thing is, it is looking more and more like there will be no trial, at least until April, which is 11 months from now. You know, when I read that, I'm like, April, and then I'm thinking, well, it's May, so it's looking like this thing is just going to continue to go as they try to get all of the information together before there's a resolution to it.
Yeah, the first question is, what does this have to do with, how does this affect if he's going to be available week 1? And we don't know that. The league has made it sound like their investigation is independent. I'm not certain that it is. They may want all the information that comes out of these civil lawsuits and hold off on a penalty for Deshaun Watson. That's still up in the air, in my opinion. But I also read those Gallup tweets are correct, and then I read a USA Today story just a little bit ago, and a lot of the same information that they don't expect that first trial. Like the plaintiff's attorney, Tony Busby, was hoping to get that first trial underway in July, and they just don't think the depositions are going to be done in time. They don't think it'll wrap up necessarily in time for Deshaun Watson to report to training camp. So therefore, it is expected for all the trials to be delayed until after this season, which, you know, again, is that good or bad for the Browns? I don't know. It feels like it's just dragging out the process. But yeah, I spent a lot of time today actually looking up some of those civil cases and reading some of the updates, because it's a situation that is just going to keep going, at least for the foreseeable future. Yeah,
and again, the NFL hasn't said when they're going to render that decision. They usually err on the side of pushing it back, because if you render a decision and then something comes out during the civil lawsuits, you have to do it again. And by and large, you want to suspend it and be done with it.
Right. That's where I think it is so uncertain, Davis, because could they suspend Deshaun Watson and then say, but we're open to the idea of suspending him for a longer time if we learn more. But, once you suspend a guy, then you can't take it back. So I think it would be hard for the NFL to issue a verdict before they have the information, but it's not an ironclad thing. You look at baseball and, there's still stuff going on with Trevor Bauer, and baseball was not afraid to issue the 2-year suspension that it did.
Yeah, without question. As you said, this is going to continue to go on, and we're going to be talking about this for quite a while. Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we dive a little deeper into the draft. Scott will also give us some insight on a couple of the picks the Browns made. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle, Telegram, as well as BrownZone.com. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the Browns draft.
My name is Brian Goody. Calling you from southeastern Ohio. How's that up north team doing up there in Yankee country? Reaching out for you, Dave. What's your view on the overall draft? And Dave, I really see you being, someday, eventually, fulfilling, your wishes, being in the actual Cleveland Browns, stadium, being that great sports announcer that you are. I love to see you putting your heart out, reaching out, doing what you do, being the great one. I like to see you follow your dreams, Dave. Hopefully someday be in the Cleveland Browns Stadium, being a sports announcer, because you're the greatest reporter I've ever heard from. Love you, buddy. Have a good day. Bye.
As always, we appreciate all of the voicemails. Scott, I did not hear that. I'll tell you that. I did not know that was coming before that. Overall, I think the draft, I see what Andrew Berry was doing. Like you, my question, I think down the road, some of these guys are going to be really talented. I'm not sure the initial thing, much like you said, can David Bell come in and do it immediately? Can some of the edge guys come in and do it immediately if they need to? Those are the questions I would have. Is that kind of where you're at with it?
Yeah, I completely agree. And my kind of lasting impression was there was no sense of urgency from the draft. And maybe that's to be expected when you don't have a first-round draft pick. But certainly when you trade out of 44 and don't make your first pick until number 68 in the third round, that signals, okay, we're not trying to rush to fill a need, which is how you want it to be. And I think it signals how the Browns feel about their roster. They feel like it's capable of going a long way in the playoffs as it is, right before the draft. And then when you take, with that first pick, a corner, which really isn't a position of need, I think that just enforces my opinion. So, I think there's upside on guys. I like Alex Wright. He's a young guy. I think he's got a big upside. We talked about Winfrey. The kicker, they addressed the big need with the kicker. Certainly, and I expected them to do that during the draft. But you don't come away with going, okay, I expect, outside of Cade York, the kicker, I'm not sure if I expect any of these guys to have a significant impact in 2022.
Yeah, I think that's real fair. And, the other thing is, keep in mind, before this year, the Browns were thought to have one of the best rosters in the NFL, and it didn't achieve what they thought it would. So it's kind of interesting. But you mentioned Cade York, and clearly, Andrew Berry went and got Cade York. It's interesting to note they had Evan McPherson on their board in the 6th round a year ago. He got taken in the 5th. So they draft Cade York from LSU. Extremely accurate from 50+, and he kicked this game winner against the Florida Gators, and celebrating as well. You got to like a kicker with number 36. It's going back to the Lou Groza days with the Browns. But you had a chance to talk to his special teams coach. What did you find out, and what did they like, and what are they getting in Cade York?
I did, and it was Greg McMahon, who was at LSU for all of Cade York's career. Now he's actually working in the USFL. He's known Mike Prefer for a long time. He knew Mike Prefer's dad for a long time. He coached in the NFL with the Saints, so he's an established NFL guy that knows what he's looking for. And one of the key points was that he would have gone up and gotten Cade York when the Browns did. The Browns could have waited and hoped he was still there. 30 picks later, I think they had another 4th-round pick or 5th-round pick, and they just said, no, we're going to take him here. And McMahon understands that. And he thinks, hey, if you like a kicker, then you don't wait, right? Go get him. Now, there's a line for that. You go get him in the 3rd round, there's a point that's too early. But in the 4th round, he didn't think it was too early, and he thought the Browns had identified Cade York as their guy. He says he's a tenacious worker. He's a ball striker, which should help in the windy conditions that he's going to walk into at First Energy Stadium. He says he's smart, and what he likes about him is he figures stuff out. So he'll go down to the stadium, he'll kick in the wind, and he'll do it until he figures out how to handle that wind. And he'll talk to Phil Dawson about kicking down there. So, he said he's got a huge leg, and he's got the mental makeup that you need to succeed in this league.
Another thing I like about him, if you can kick in Death Valley with those fans, you're going to be right at home with the dog pound. So,
well, yeah, a lot of big games. I mean, they won the national championship when he was a freshman. Right, and he kicked. When he was a kicker as a freshman, So yes, the NFL is different, but being in close games and being in playoff situations should not be a huge adjustment.
You also had a chance to talk to one of Alex Wright's coaches. Take us through that and what you see with him and what they think about Wright from University of Alabama at Birmingham.
Yeah, it's the head coach, and he raved about him. The thing that struck me when the Browns talked about Alex Wright is how he came in for a pre-draft visit, and everybody in the building fell in love with him. And the UAB coach is like, that's what every team does, is because he's that kind of a guy. He's a small-town guy from Alabama, but he played at a high level, but he's still got that down-home kind of guy to him. He says he really cares about winning. He cares about his teammates, and that comes through. And you love his size, right? 6'5", 270-ish, can probably get a little bit bigger. And he left after his junior year, and UAB said if we had him for one more year, we think he would have gotten even better. So the point is, his best football is ahead of him. And they really believe that, and I'm sure the Browns believe that. And that's why we talk about it's not just about 2022. If you feel like 2 years from now, Alex Wright is a legitimate strong side defensive end, then it was worth taking him, pick number 78.
And there will be stories both on York as well as Wright, brownzone.com on the internet. So a little bit more in depth. Scott will have those up. Before we go to break, take a look at this. This is Nick Chubb. We always like watching Nick Chubb. This is 675 pounds, and that is a major bar that is bending. And Nick Chubb has no problem at all squatting 675 pounds. That hurts just looking at it. Look at the bar bend. Scott, that's a running back. That's the Browns running back. That's not a lineman. That's not a linebacker. That is a guy that is looking to run over opponents. You have to like watching a running back do that.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Two things strike me about that. One is, Nick Chubb's not a real big self-promoter, but I think he's proud of those kind of things, right? Those kind of videos, he's like, I'm all for because it shows the hard work that he puts in all year round. And number two, that's all about thighs, right? And lower body strength. And it's why he runs through tackles and why defenders bounce off him is because his legs are able to put up 675 pounds.
Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we will get the thoughts of Scott about Denzel Ward's contract, also some free agents that make the most sense for the Browns to sign who are still out there. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery, Partners in Education, where stars shine.
Thanks for buying a fishing license. I want you to picture all the great things this simple purchase does. Like building public boat ramps, keeping local waters clean, and maintaining a healthy fish population.
What's Mom doing?
When you buy a fishing license, you do a lot. Every dollar protects and maintains your local waterways for future generations to enjoy. Visit takemefishing.org.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. You can also read him on brownzone.com. Scott, we stole this from your mailbag. Do you think the Denzel Ward record-setting contract was a wise move by the Browns?
I do. I think he's proven that he's a top, 5'8" corner in this league. He's obviously the Browns' #1 corner. He's a homegrown guy, not only from that he grew up here and went to Ohio State, but the Browns drafted him at number 4. And when you have a guy that talented at a premium position like corner, then you have to pay him. And that's what the market was, and it made all the sense in the world to me.
I'm with you. And the other thing is the NFL is only going to get more and more pass happy, and you better have guys that can run with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Boyd and fill in the blank of any really good receiver because you're going to need that. This one's kind of interesting as well. So Bleacher Report came out with free agents the Browns should pursue after the NFL draft. Now, the first one, it's no surprise, edge rusher Jadeveon Clowney. Also on that list, another veteran edge rusher, Jason Pierre-Paul. You see the fit for Clowney. And then kind of a wild card one is wide receiver Albert Wilson was with the Miami Dolphins. I think if the Browns get Clowney, they're probably done with free agent edge rushers, and I think that would be a huge check mark off Andrew Berry's to-do list.
Yeah, I agree, and it feels like they've left the door open for Jadeveon Clowney. I asked again after the draft, and it was 50-50. And I just think that's a lot about how Jadeveon Clowney is, right? He waits to sign with teams. He's, I've mentioned this before, he's kind of a fickle guy. He wants to play where it's warm, but he did like playing with the Browns last year. He likes Myles Garrett. So I think the team feels like it could go either way. And if the price is right and he says yes, they would gladly have him back. If not, they've done a lot at that position where they think they can get by. But that's not a position you just want to get by at, right? So Jadeveon Clowney shifts how you think about that defensive line and that defense overall. So I think that would be a big signing, but I think Andrew Berry had to do what he did in the draft and even before the draft in case Clowney says, no, I'm going to go somewhere else.
The other thing would be if Clowney decides to go somewhere else, do you think it ends up, Hughes or Pierre-Paul or Ingram, somebody that's a lesser but let's make sure that Wright and the young guys can develop kind of guy?
I do. I feel like, maybe Chase Winovich fills this role, but, he doesn't have a huge resume either. Like, I feel like you can figure out your first and second down end with Wright and Weatherly and even Rochelle, maybe a couple of free agents they signed right before the draft. Bigger guys that can hold down the fort and set the edge opposite Myles Garrett. But who's going to rush the quarterback on third down? And like I said, could be Winovich, but, I like the idea of one more guy out there, a proven guy. Jerry Hughes does intrigue me. A guy like Melvin Ingram, I think, is still on the free agent market. Somebody that's a third down specialist, has done it before, that if other teams are double teaming Myles Garrett, can really have success getting to the quarterback off the other end.
Yeah, and again, a veteran guy, don't need him to play every down. Go get the quarterback when it's 3rd and 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, I'm with you. Let's take a look at this. This is Jason Lockenfora's playoff predictions from CBS.com. I'm going to preface this by saying Lockenfora is not a fan of the Browns at this point. So he's got the Bengals winning the North again. Team was no fluke. You see what he thinks there. He has the Ravens, Chargers, and Broncos being the playoff teams. So no Browns, no Titans. He's got the Chiefs, Colts, Bengals, and Bills as the division winners, Broncos, Chargers, and Ravens as the wild card team. The AFC's loaded. I part of me wants to say you're crazy, the Browns are a playoff team. The AFC's loaded.
It is, and so much depends on how much time Deshaun Watson might miss, right? That might be the difference between 11 wins and 8 wins, and that's the difference in going to the playoffs. So I would understand if anybody picking playoff teams right now shies away from the Browns. I get that. And I kind of agree that Cincinnati's not a fluke, but I also think that just the way the NFL works, you're kind of in for a recession. And we saw it to some degree with the Browns from 2020 to 2021. Made a huge jump and then regressed a little bit. And it would not be a surprise to me to see the Bengals do that. And I would expect the Ravens to make a jump. I thought they had a great draft. You expect Lamar Jackson to be healthy again, right? So it's interesting how the AFC North is going to play out, but I think that's just kind of a microcosm of the AFC. There's just a lot of good teams, and it's going to come down to what quarterback plays well, what teams stay healthy, and kind of who plays best when those playoff spots are on the line in, December and January.
Yeah, and again, there's a number of them, and I agree with you. The Bengals snuck up on some people. They're not sneaking up on anybody the year coming up. All right, let's take a look at this one. This one's also kind of interesting. I want to get your thoughts on this. So the Browns travel the fourth fewest miles. This is miles traveled. The column on the far right is time zones that you go through. Steelers travel the fewest, then the Lions, the Ravens, the Browns, and the Bengals. So it's the AFC North. Travels the fewest miles and the fewest time zones that they go through to play their schedule next year. How big of a deal is not traveling a whole lot in terms of miles for the Browns and the entire AFC North at that point?
Yeah, it's significant, right? Because it's easy. Easy travel is easier. You're not going to the West Coast 3 times in a season, and that's a hassle. And sometimes you go out on a Friday and it switches, just messes up the whole schedule. I don't think it's as significant because the rest of the division is in basically the same spot. So it's not like you're gaining an edge over them. Maybe you gain an edge over the Denvers or the Chargers, who have to travel farther, and you could be fighting for a wild card spot against them. But I think it's fascinating that Pittsburgh doesn't even leave the Eastern time zone. I don't know how that's even possible that they could do it, but I believe that stat, and I saw it before, but it's mind-boggling that they don't have to leave the East Coast or the Eastern time zone.
I know. Think about that. So there's no West Coast trips. They don't even go to the Central time zone. So, yeah.
No Chicago, no Nashville, no Texas.
Yeah, it is what it is. All right, Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take one more time out, other side of the break. We'll turn our attention. The schedule comes out Thursday. We'll take a look at that. Plus, voicemail on thoughts on Deshaun Watson. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. You can also read him on brownzone.com. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. An interesting analogy between the Browns signing of Deshaun Watson and a very famous sporting event.
Yeah, the Kentucky Derby's good news for the Browns. The trainer, Rich Strike, was told that he wasn't in the Derby, but then they called back a little later and said he got in. Sounds like what happened with Deshaun Watson, and tells me the Browns are going to win the Super Bowl. Go Browns.
All right, let's welcome in Scott Petrick. And Scott, yeah, all right, I'll buy it. 80-1. So good for him.
Yeah, that was unbelievable. And seeing that race from the overhead view and watching him kind of zig and zag in and out of the traffic, and then finish like he did was crazy. And the Browns are way under 80-1 to win the Super Bowl. So.
Yeah, there you go. So you can write it down. Browns Super Bowl winners, just like the Kentucky Derby. NFL.com released the top 10 anticipated games. So the games they are most looking forward to coming up. Schedule will be released Thursday. Number 9, they have the Browns at the Houston Texans. I get it. It's Deshaun Watson going back. You know, the Seahawks and the Broncos were number 2. That's kind of Russell Wilson going back to Seattle. But, what game are you looking forward to most? That would not have made my top 10, I don't think.
Yeah, that game does nothing for me. It really doesn't. And, if Deshaun gets suspended, I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's an early season game where you just avoid his return to Houston altogether. The games that, the division games are always big, and especially this year with how good we just talked about, I expect the division to be. But also the Chargers and Buccaneers come to town, and then the Browns go to Buffalo, right? And those are 3 teams that are Super Bowl caliber teams, and we should get a real good idea how the Browns stack up.
What are your thoughts? Do you think they get some of the prime time, the Sunday, Mondays? I would guess they get a couple of those. You never know.
Yeah. I mean, I was trying to think, last year they had a few, but then they go 8 and 9, but then it's, Deshaun Watson, but how much spotlight does the NFL want to put on Deshaun Watson? So I would think it settles at about 3 would be my guess.
Yeah, that's fair, and you figure it'll likely be the Ravens and Joe Burrow, the Bengals with Joe Burrow and maybe Tom Brady or Josh Allen. Those it'll be the quarterback matchups that you're looking at would be my guess. All right, this one we're going to switch our focus a little bit. Which teams make the most sense for Baker Mayfield? This is Pro Football Focus, and they list Seattle, Carolina, and Houston as 1, 2, and 3. And then they give you the caveat that if he's cut, he becomes a backup option everywhere. And we go from that to Pete Carroll also saying, I don't see us making a trade for anybody at all at quarterback, being the Seahawks. Which, okay, if you want Drew Lock, I'm okay with that. Scott, what do you think? My gut feeling has been for a little bit. I think it ends up being somebody that gets that has a quarterback injury that nobody's really thinking about. I think Andrew Berry waits it out for that long.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's going to be a test of will if he decides to wait that long because, quarterbacks usually don't get hurt until the game starts. So you're going to be waiting an awful long time. You're going to be paying part of Baker's salary as it is. You got to use a roster spot on him. So I don't know. I would still bet against that, Dave. I would bet that he's traded before, or there's a move made, preferably a trade, right, before training camp. But I see where you're going with it, and I think Andrew Berry does. I think part of him says, let's just wait until there's a reason to trade him and we get a decent offer. I wouldn't rule out Seattle. I know what Pete Carroll said, but I think people are posturing. I still would not rule out Carolina, despite, drafting Matt Corral. If the Browns were willing to take whatever percentage of the salary that is, I think that would make at least a couple of teams really consider Baker Mayfield. And so maybe the Browns just feel like, hey, when we decide to do that, bite that bullet, we're going to have options. Until then, we're going to hold out and see if any team wants him for full price or mostly full price. And I can see the thinking there. I would say just get the situation resolved. But Andrew Berry doesn't seem to have the same sense of urgency.
Do you get the sense that if in fact he came back, my sense is I don't think he can afford personally to become a distraction. He basically has to be on his best behavior if he comes back and is in camp or any of that.
Yeah, I would lean toward that because I get the reality of it. He's trying to look good for future employers. I understand that. I also think I know Baker to a certain degree in his personality, and I think it'd be hard for him to not create some kind of distraction or controversy. I mean, if he opens his mouth to any reporter, I just don't think he's going to bite his tongue. So it would be interesting to see how he handles that. I don't think he wants that situation at all. I think he wants this resolved. And I think the Browns do too, maybe to a lesser degree, and maybe that they feel like that's the only leverage they have. And maybe by waiting, they can get Baker to agree to take a pay cut, which would help him get traded. But yeah, it would be interesting. It would be a really interesting dynamic, Dave, to see that happen. And then especially if you got word about a Watson suspension and would the Browns actually proceed is if they could start Baker for a few games. I mean, it's really hard for me to kind of fathom that, but I guess I, can't eliminate it from from the list of scenarios to consider.
Yeah, I get where you're going with Baker's personality. You'd almost have to make him, he's not going to be available to the media just to avoid it. All right, this again from one of your mailbag pieces. Do you think Jimmy Haslam and the Browns will get any significant blowback from the Watson contract?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think it'll be long lasting. I think there might be some, and I'm not a big conspiracy guy, but I think there might be something in play with the Baker situation. Like, hey, why are we going to go make a trade for a guy that might become available if they cut him? There's no, just not stick it to the Browns, but, we kind of feel like the Browns didn't have to go spend that money on Deshaun Watson. It's going to affect all of our checkbooks and bank accounts and salary caps. So, I could see a couple of owners kind of digging their heels in, but I don't think that'll last long, and I don't think it's a league-wide thing that is keeping the Browns from making any moves they need to make.
Yeah, I get you. There are, it's kind of a personality thing. It rubbed some personalities the wrong way, and some guys are like, it's kind of is what it is. Scott Petrick, as always, man, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Scott.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, Scott Petrick, make sure you read them. Pages of the Elyria Chronicle Telegram. You can also read them on brownzone.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. We will continue talking Browns. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns. We're going to head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the Browns draft that just wrapped up.
People need to realize the Browns ain't drafting for needs now. They're drafting for the future. We can't keep paying people like Greedy Williams and everybody. There's only so much money on their salary cap.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Mac Robinson, 92.3 The Fan. So, Mac, it's I've described it as a three-dimensional. You've got this year's team, you've got the team in 2 years, and you got the team in 4 years. And I think Andrew Berry has kind of figured out how to balance the three of them pretty successfully so far.
Yeah, and Dave, I think that you're spot on because you look at that kind of balance between, all three of those at that point. That's a good way to look at it because, again, you have these players that are coming up when it comes to contracts and, the listener, put in there, Greedy Williams, him being one of the big ones, because, again, he's a very talented corner, somebody who, was in the top 32 of all cornerbacks in the NFL last year, according to Pro Football Focus and his coverage. And so you look at it, you can't keep everybody around. As much as I would love to go ahead and keep all these players in Cleveland, you're not going to be able to do that in the long term. So with that being said, you're drafting some of these players for future needs down the road that makes sense so that you can go ahead and keep up with this. A great example of this is actually the LA Rams. People talk about, the whole bleep them picks narrative, at least when it comes to, how they operate. But in actuality, they ended up getting a lot of those compensatory picks because of players that they let walk. And because of that, they keep on restocking and churning out the back of that roster. And especially looking at that starting lineup, you see how they're able to kind of keep that cost effective because you're drafting so many players in those back 3 rounds and constantly filling out that depth.
And the other thing is quite honestly, you have an idea, but you're not certain how quickly these guys in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round are going to catch on and develop with what you need them to do. So it buys them a little bit of time. One of the guys that's intriguing, David Bell, the wide receiver that the Browns took from Purdue. And from his Instagram, he's shown us he's going to wear the number 18. So we went back. Taylor Gabriel had a good year with Brian Hoyer one year, wearing 18 for the Browns. A.J. Green, wide receiver, 18 with the Bengals and the Cardinals. And I'm going to go real old school on you. You might not have even heard of this guy. I'm a little older than you, Mac. Charlie Joyner was a pretty good wide receiver who wore 18 back in the 70s and maybe even early 80s. But so David Bell wearing 18 and showing us on Instagram there.
Yeah, you know what? I'm excited for David Bell, and especially, and Dave, I don't know if you saw him building the Browns or not, but, the way that Kevin Stefanski talked about it, and even Andrew Berry, after they selected him and prior to the draft, and what they kind of look for when it comes to those wide receivers, first thing that they talk about every single time is that separation factor. And he's able to separate. He's shown that he has great hands. Kevin Stefanski thought that he has the best hands, in this draft class. So, you look at what David Bell is able to do, and keep in mind, he might be wide receiver 2 or 3, whatever. You look at the running backs. You have Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb. You already have Amari Cooper. You have Donovan Peoples-Jones, David Njoku. Realistically, he's fighting for that, 5th option, 6th option. So he doesn't necessarily have to be the guy that comes out and gives you 1,000 yards in year 1. But all he really has to do is be that dependable receiver who's able to get open and make those catches when he needs to. And so I think David Bell could have a very interesting rookie year, and I think that he has a very bright future here in Cleveland.
Yeah, I'm with you. I what I've seen, I like. I didn't sit and watch hours of Purdue football, but what I have seen of David Bell, I like what I see. Let's go the Pat McAfee show. So Jarvis Landry reports over the weekend have come out. He's likely moving on. Here's Darius Butler on his thoughts on Jarvis Landry, the player.
Just like we talked about receivers, you draft them, you want to get young. Just like receivers, DBs, that's a position you always want to get cheaper. You want to get younger, especially if you get a guy that can come in and play in the system. Jarvis Landry probably has a price that he wants, going into these teams, and they're probably far apart right now. Especially last year, he played a lot of last year injured, and a lot of these people, they don't really care. That's the film you put out. This is your price that we're going to put on you, and if you're coming in the building, those things don't match up. Jarvis probably going to wait it out. I'm sure he signs with somebody, maybe close to training camp, maybe after, maybe an injury on another team happens. But I would love to have Jarvis Landry in my receiver meeting room. I would love to have him on my team. He is a dog. He plays hard. He brings it, and he's a difference maker when it comes to moving those chains. He has been since coming into the league, and I think he'll continue to be so. So whoever does land him, I think will be lucky.
And Mac, when you talk about Jarvis Landry, he probably doesn't fit pay-wise with what the Browns want to do, with what's left for the Browns to do.
Yeah, and Dave, you always kind of look at it from an on-field standpoint. I think that, Jarvis Landry and what he does well, I think that they kind of have that a little bit taken care of between, David Bell obviously being somebody. It's not going to be, apples to apples when it comes to David Bell to Jarvis Landry. But what does David Bell do? His 40 time might not be, the fastest, but it was faster than Jarvis's coming out of LSU. And on top of that, he's able to separate and accelerate better at the start of his routes when it comes to David Bell compared to Jarvis Landry. So I think that you're going to be able to see that separation come into play and become a factor for David Bell there as well. And, I think that he's right when it comes to the off the field standpoint. And I think that that's something that, I would absolutely love to have here in Cleveland. I love Jarvis Landry. I'd love to have him here. But at the end of the day, I think that what we're looking at when it comes to Jarvis Landry is just the fact that I think it's just time for these two to kind of separate and move on. And, I would love to have him here in Cleveland teaching those younger players. But I also think that for Jarvis Landry in an offense where, like I mentioned, David Bell is maybe your fifth or sixth option, I don't know if Jarvis Landry should be taking away touches from a David Njoku or from a Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt in the offense, or obviously not Amari Cooper. So, it's kind of figuring out what role is he going to have, and is he okay with and comfortable with taking on that role? And I just don't think that he's comfortable with that at this point in time.
Yeah, and I certainly hope he lands somewhere where he can get some touches and show what he can do. Was a guy that Cleveland liked, and rightly so. Are you concerned with the wide receiver room the way it's currently constructed?
Yes and no. I would say this. I think that I would love to have a veteran receiver in that room, and especially somebody who can, teach some of these younger players. Obviously, you still have Anthony Schwartz, who's learning the ins and outs of the position. And then you also bring in David Bell, excuse me. You have Donovan Peoples-Jones there as well. You have Amari Cooper as the old head in that room as well. But, I think that you could use another veteran in there. But, the trade-off in that sense is that, you have some of these younger receivers that, were taken towards the back end of the draft that, have some intriguing upside going forward. I look at somebody like Isaiah Weston out of Northern Iowa where, he has all the tools that you want. And so at that point, am I risking somebody else trying to sign him if you try to put him on the practice squad, or somebody claiming him on waivers in training camp at that point? I would be hard-pressed to go ahead and do that. And so, I kind of look at the balance of it all, and I really wonder, do you add in another veteran receiver into that room, or do you maybe try to keep the upside going forward and really bank on the fact that, you have a talented quarterback like Deshaun Watson who can kind of raise that talent level of those receivers. You saw him do it in 2020 with the Houston Texans, and just that wide receiver room and that roster and wide receiver room was devoid of talent other than Brandon Cooks for the most part. And you had the older Randall Cobb at that point in his stage of his career. So, I look at the talent level, and he was able to lead the NFL in passing yards. I want to see what he's able to do with Donovan Peoples-Jones, what he's able to do with Amari Cooper and all of these players. So, I think it's a trade-off that Andrew Berry has to weigh and keep an eye out for, especially, with the construction of this roster.
Mac Robinson and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we turn our attention to the Browns, tight ends, and a little bit of fantasy football. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. We're going to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about Browns tight ends.
Hi, this is Jerry again. I'm not hearing a whole lot of talk about the tight end room. Any thoughts on that? Thanks.
Jerry, as always, appreciate the voicemails. Mac, I think the tight ends, they won't play as many 3 tight ends. They're going to play more 3 wide receivers. And I think a lot of that has to do with the skill set of Deshaun Watson. But Harrison Bryant and David Njoku are pretty good.
Yeah, no, and you're not wrong at all. And the thing that's nice is that, over the last couple of years, you've seen David Njoku kind of go from just being that receiving threat that you have to be concerned about to taking it to that next level. He's improved as a blocker. He's probably the best blocking tight end on the team. And so you go ahead, put him at tight end. You can put him in line. And then you also have somebody like Harrison Bryant who can play a little bit more of that H-back role for you. He has the quickness. I don't know if he necessarily has the experience as of right now to be that number one tight end for you, but I think that him as a tight end number 2, I think makes a lot of sense. But I think that David Njoku has a ton of upside this year. I think that he can finally kind of put it together now that you have that quarterback to pair up with him. And keep in mind, he was somebody who, really loved playing with Darren Fells a couple years ago, had a lot of success with him. Fells obviously leaving Cleveland in 2018 to go to play with Watson in 2019. So I think it's interesting that now that you have a quarterback that's really able to, successfully utilize those tight ends, I think it's going to be interesting to see how Kevin Stefanski kind of operates that offense.
So NFL Nation, fantasy sleepers for 2022, ESPN.com. One for every team for the Browns, David Njoku. And they're remaking their offense around Watson, and Njoku could be one of the major beneficiaries. You see there won't be in as many tight ends heavy sets. Mac, you and I have talked about this. Njoku is a matchup problem, and now you have a guy who can throw deep over the middle pretty regularly.
Yeah, and Dave, I mentioned Darren Fells the last 2 years that he was with Deshaun Watson. He had 34 catches for 340 yards, but 7 touchdowns in 2019, and that was with DeAndre Hopkins on the outside to take away that attention. 2020, those numbers dipped a little bit, up to 21 receptions, and then he had 314 yards, only 4 touchdowns in 2020. The big difference there, no DeAndre Hopkins in 2020. So with Amari Cooper on the outside, maybe you can see David Njoku kind of free up the seam, and also be a big red zone threat, obviously, there for Deshaun Watson, who likes to target his tight ends in the past. So I think that this could be an interesting pairing between Njoku and Deshaun Watson. And if I'm being honest, outside of, the top 6, I think that you're looking at for this year, obviously you have Kittle, Kelsey, Kyle Pitts, and then you're looking at Darren Waller as well as TJ Hawkinson and Mark Andrews. I think that you slot David Njoku just underneath those guys, coming in at number 7, but I think that he could challenge for that depending on how many games Deshaun Watson plays this year.
Yeah, and Browns fans, if what we're talking about as far as seam routes and those kind of things, think about the things the Browns have had trouble defending before last year. That's what we're talking about with David Njoku. All right, this one's kind of interesting as well. Sharp Football Analytics, fantasy football quarterback rankings for 2022. You see the top 10, Allen, Herbert, Mahomes, Murray, Jackson. And then you get into, they got Trey Lance at number 10. They have Deshaun Watson all the way down at 14. They got Baker Mayfield at 36 and Jacoby Brissett at 38. I think Deshaun's a little low on that. And again, they may be factoring in that he isn't going to get to play all 17 games, or the thought was that he's not going to get to play all 17 games. It's looking more and more like that suspension might be down the road a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that they're kind of keeping that in mind when it comes to Watson. Because, again, I think that if you're factoring in missing 6 games, then, at that point, then you're really looking at that and saying, all right, coming in at 14 isn't half bad, especially given the fact that you're missing, almost half of the season. I think that him sliding in at 14, I think makes a lot of sense in that sense. But, looking at some of the quarterbacks ahead of him, Aaron Rodgers coming in at number 13, that seems a little low for me. I know that they don't necessarily have the weapons, obviously, without Devontae Adams, but it seems a little bit low to me, and especially to the Trey Lance at 10, I don't really get. For somebody who, keep in mind, hasn't really been a true starter in over 2 years. He started 1 game at North Dakota State, and then last year, started in relief of Jimmy Garoppolo, but really didn't get that much action. So, keeping all of that in mind, I think that it's a little bit low for Watson. I could see him kind of climbing up, but especially if he doesn't get suspended, I don't think that top 10 is a hot take. I don't think top 5 is a hot take at that point. Between the options that he has on the outside, we mentioned David Njoku, I mentioned Amari Cooper, and I think David Bell is somebody who's a little bit of a sleeper. Won't necessarily be a super fantasy relevant player, but I think that he's going to be good enough to go ahead and elevate Watson up a little bit more. So it wouldn't shock me if Watson ends up in the top 5 if he does play the entire year.
Yeah, I agree with you, in part because teams are going to have to respect Brown's running game. He hasn't had that with the Texans at all. Mac Robinson, 92.3 The Fan. Great stuff as always. Appreciate it, Mac. Thanks very much.
Of course. Thanks, Dave. Always appreciate the time.
Mac Robinson, make sure you listen out for him, 92.3 The Fan. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Scheduled guest, Browns beat reporter for cleveland.com and the Plain Dealer, Mary Kay Cabot. And Jack Duffin from the Orange and Brown Report is a salary cap expert, has been on top of a lot of the Browns moves coming up. That is tomorrow, 4 o'clock on Sports for CLE. We'll see you then. Have a great night, everybody.